John Lennon was a prolific songwriter who produced several famous songs, including Imagine Help, as well as All You Need Is Love. But there were two songs in particular that he thought were fantastic and sometimes wished he had composed. A huge admirer of vintage rock, Lennon yet thought it was cool back then. Lennon vented his jealousy in a 1975 interview with Spin, saying that he would have done everything to write Rock Your Baby, George McRae's breakthrough hit. He never thought of himself as an academic, but he did confess that he had trouble penning songs with such a literal and cerebral tone. Another song that Paul McCartney wrote and that Lennon much admired was All My Loving. This song was a major factor in the early popularity of the Beatles and helped to generate a great deal of attention in America. It was featured on their 1963 album With the Beatles. The song became a smashing success in Canada after receiving heavy radio play. It was then brought to the United States for sale, where it peaked at number 45 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1964. Just before his untimely death in 1980, Lennon gave an interview to Playboy in which he confessed that McCartney had written All My Loving in its entirety. Despite not having any input into the song's composition, he was pleased with the guitar work he did in the background and thought it was a masterful piece of songwriting. John Lennon discussed his early years, his feelings of loss when the Beatles broke up, and his views on royalties from his books in an interview with writer David Sheff that was ultimately published in 2000 as All We Are Saying, the last major interview with John Lennon and Yoko Ono. He said that he had long advocated for Ringo Starr and George Harrison to get a cut of the band's royalties from their songs. Under the supervision of manager Alan Klein, Lennon and McCartney allegedly owned all content produced by their publishing business, McLean. He felt bad that George and Ringo didn't get a cut, but he knew he couldn't do anything to make things right. Nevertheless, he said that he, and not Klein or McCartney, had advocated for the distribution of 5% of McLean's revenues to George and Ringo, a sum that was nevertheless considerable when the chance presented itself. Even though Paul had to give his okay, Lennon insisted it was his idea from the start. Lennon further noted that he was never paid for his work on songs by George or Ringo. He remembered helping out on George's Taxman without expecting anything in return, not even credit. When George and Ringo accused him of abandoning them or manipulating them over publication rights, he felt this unacknowledgement was a contributing factor to his animosity against them. Even though Lennon felt the publishing earnings should have gone to George and Ringo more, he still insisted that he and McCartney were the real Beatles. George and Ringo would not have had the same spellbinding power without John and Paul, but he implied that they might have still been successful even with alternative bandmates. Nevertheless, he was careful to recognize their unique abilities, stressing that his viewpoint in no way diminished their impact on the band.